welcome to Horse Race Politics. Today is September 4th, 2020. In this episode, you're not going to really see much editing from me. The reason for that is because it's already like 11 p.m. and I'm just really trying to fit in an episode by the end of September 4th. What happened last night actually was after I finished recording that episode, it took a while to upload because I was trying to get the best possible quality in, but for some reason, it didn't finish processing until right after 12. So whenever you first click on the video, it's kind of weird. When you first click on the video, it says September 4th as the upload date, but if you refresh it, it says September 3rd. I'm not exactly sure why that happens. I think that happens on whenever you upload a video after midnight because YouTube's located in California. So if you live in some other time zone, you upload after midnight, but it's not their midnight. It still shows a different date depending on whether or not you refresh the page. But I think the plan for this video is to just go into my thoughts about what the state of the 2020 election currently is like. I haven't really had a good plan for what today's video would be about, but I still want to keep up this daily schedule. I realize that it's not easy to keep up a daily schedule for the next 2 months, but I still want to give it my best shot. So let's talk about Trump versus Biden, 2020 presidential election specifically. Yeah, I want to emphasize I'm talking about mostly presidential election. I might bring up details about the Senate election or the House elections, or maybe even some government gubernatorial election. So where should we start? The election is in exactly 60 days now. Soon it'll be 59 because I'm recording this pretty late at night, it's 11 p.m. But right now it's 60 days until the election. Now, who do I think is going to win the election as of now? I think Biden definitely has the upper hand here. I think 538.com gave Biden a 71% chance of winning. Now that's more than half, which means he's more likely than not to win. But let's not forget, back in 2016, that's literally the exact same percentage that was given to Hillary Clinton, for her chances of winning, 71% versus Trump's 29%. But obviously, all of us know what happened on election night in 2016. Trump took the swing states no one was expecting him to win: Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania. He was able to snatch the victory away from Clinton. Will Biden be able to win those three states? Because all he needs to do is win Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and then win every state that Clinton did, and then he has the election in the bag. This really isn't that hard of an election for him to win. And for Trump, since he won last election, if he just wins the same states, then obviously he'd win the election again. But for Trump, he's obviously not doing as well this year as in 2016. I think most people would agree on that. In 2020, the pandemic is there, obviously, COVID 19. And then there was also all the controversy about the George Floyd killing and then how he handled it. A lot of people didn't really approve of the way he handled it. So all that is there in 2020 this year that was not there back in 2016. So I think that definitely goes in favor for Biden. But one thing that might actually help Trump a bit here now is that a lot of people, I think they aren't really a fan of the riots specifically that are going on in all these major cities. I think Trump emphasizing this, I think that'll help him a little bit since he's more against the riots than Biden. Obviously, both candidates oppose the riots, but Trump is like making it one of his key issues of the campaign. How he's against the riots. That might help him a bit. That's actually what gave Richard Nixon the victory in 1968. Most political scientists agree on, historians agree on. The him going against the riots and speaking for law and order. That's what gave Nixon the victory in 1968. Because this was the year where Robert Kennedy was shot and killed, and MLK, Martin Luther King Jr., was shot and killed. And because of that, there were riots all over the street, all across the country in 1968. And then Nixon fully honed in on the law and order messaging, and I think that seems like that's what eventually led him to getting a pretty substantial lead over Hubert Humphrey in the 1968 election. But obviously, 2020 is a completely different year, a completely different landscape than 1968, so we can't necessarily look that far back into the past to see what will happen in this election. But the whole thing with this election is that it's really a referendum of how well people think Trump is doing. The thing about midterm elections, I mean, elections that involve incumbents, I mean, I don't think midterm is the proper mid I don't think midterm is the proper term. Sorry, but yeah, I would say the thing with election involving an incumbent president after they've already served for 4 years. The thing is that the election mainly is a referendum on how well people think they've been doing, And also the thing about these elections that the incumbent is usually considered like the default option, like oh they're already president. The biggest one of the biggest advantages that an incumbent has is that they've already been president for 4 years. They already have a lot of accomplishments to brag about. They can brag about like their economic accomplishments, foreign policy accomplishments, all sorts of stuff they can brag about if they've already done good things in their 4 years. And one of the biggest things also is that people can imagine them being president. If they've already had the office for 4 years, people already know what it's like for them being president. It's not really out of mind at all. It's a completely realistic scenario. Like they've been the president. It's just continuing more of the same. That's why they're usually considered the default option. That's why incumbents who've already served 4 years, they usually have a better chance of winning than when they were originally trying to run for the president. But in this election specifically, the conditions are really different from other almost any other election year. This pandemic is a once in a century situation. The last one was 1918 through 1920, but this pandemic will really test test to see how committed Trump's fan base is. I would say, because I would say Trump more than Biden has a more committed fan base. Like, I think Trump's fan base, they're more attached to Trump personally. They're more like more deeper supporters of him. Like if you just watch his rallies, you can obviously tell that may help Trump, that may hurt Trump. It can go either way. I think one of the reasons why it'll help Trump is that his base 30 to 40%. That's I would say around how much base support he has. Like no matter what he does, he's always gonna have 30 to 40% of his of the population voting for him. So he because of how in touch Trump is with his base, he can always count on 30 to 40% to vote for him. As long as you got the base, you'll never do really badly. But on the other hand, if Trump only focuses on his base, he forgets about everyone else, then that could still result in a landslide victory for Biden. See, if only 40% of people vote for Trump, that's still only 60% of people voting for Biden. That's still barely more than half the country. But the thing about elections is that 60% is still considered a landslide. I know it seems kind of counterintuitive. In most other aspects of life, you don't consider 60% like a crushing victory. Like, if you get 60% on a test, that's a failure, but 60% in an election is a giant success. So if Biden somehow manages to get like 60% of the popular vote, that would be an insane outcome for Biden. But usually it's never more than 58%, 50 to 55 to 58% for a presidential election winner. Usually the loser of the election never gets below 42%. That's one thing I've noticed throughout all the past elections. And Trump's approval rating, that's another thing I would like to bring up. Throughout the past 4 years, Trump's approval rating, even though it's been consistently below the 50% mark, consistently underwater, it stayed relatively stable, more stable than any other president in recent history. Yeah, sorry, I just now tried searching up what Trump's exact approval rating was when the 2016 election was going on, but I couldn't get an exact figure for the exact percentage that Trump's approval rating was during the day of the 2016 election, like what he was polling at, like up to that day. But just know that it was somewhere in the 40s range, and since he's become president, his approval rating has never left the 40s range, which means it's bad that his approval rating has never been higher, but it's also good for him in that it's never been lower than 40%. So that consistency might actually help him in this election because if you guys ever heard the saying, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, well, that might actually help him here because Trump, even in 2016, had a really low approval rating, historically speaking. He's never had above a 50% approval rating in his entire presidency. And for Trump, out of all the past presidents, Trump has had one of the lowest approval ratings historically throughout his presidency. But did it help him? Did he still win the presidency? Yes. Even with all his controversial statements and even with his only 45-ish% approval rating, he was still able to win the presidency. If he was able to do it with a 45% approval rating in 2016, what's stopping him from doing that again now? So that's just one thing to keep in mind when keeping track of the election. If he was able to do in 2016, you have to see what's different between now and 2016. Although the political climate and economic climate and social climate is completely different now in 2016, what matters is how committed is Trump's base to Trump himself. Are Trump supporters willing to vote for him even when the pandemic's still going on? Are they do they think that he'll be able to get us through the pandemic One thing that also you should keep in mind is some people might want to keep the same leader as before. So Trump was the president when the pandemic began. So a lot of people they might want to vote for Trump because they want to keep the same person in office. They want to keep the same president throughout a crisis because they may think that oh, if you have a presidential change in the middle of a crisis, then the handling won't be as good. But if you have the same person handling it throughout and they see to the end, then the handling will be a lot better. This is what a lot of people say gave George W. Bush in 2004 the victory in the presidential election. It's the fact that he started the Iraq War. The Iraq War started under his presidency. 9/11 happened under him. That was the war on terror that all started under George W. Bush's first term. So a lot of people were thinking, oh, it's better to just keep with George Bush than switch to some other presidential candidate while the war on terror is still going on. So that's why a lot of people chose George W. Bush instead of John Kerry in the 2004 election. They thought, oh, keep the same leadership. We don't want to have massive changes. That's just going to make things too unstable, and that's just going to make things last a lot longer than they need to. But anyway, these are just some of my thoughts for what this election is going to be like. I really just needed to crank out a quick video for today, honestly. So, like, I just did this entire video on one take. That's why I had a lot of pauses here. That's why I had a lot of small pauses where I had to think about what I had to say. So this video might be a little bit hard to follow with, but honestly, I don't have much time to do anything else. I don't have much time for editing. I was extremely busy today, I'll tell you that, but hopefully YouTube processed this video on time. Hopefully I can meet the 12 a.m. deadline today. Yesterday I was barely off. Tomorrow I promise that I will make a better edited video, more detailed video, and more thought out video. I kind of just thought of this video topic last minute. Oh, why don't I just talk about the 2020 election, what things are currently like right now, who's gonna win? So let me reiterate: Biden is more likely to win than Trump, but never be too confident, never be too complacent. Same thing with Trump supporters. I'd say it goes both ways. See, Biden supporters, they think that oh, Biden's up in every single poll, and Biden has a 70% chance of winning, and the pandemic's going on, so Biden should easily win, right? Well, 2016, everybody thought it would be easy for Hillary Clinton to win, but that obviously didn't happen. But it also goes the other way for Trump supporters and Trump. See, a lot of people, what they do now is whenever they see that Trump is down in the polls by a few points, they point to 2016 and say, oh, Trump was down in the polls back then also, but he was still able to win the presidency. But, but here's the thing you shouldn't just because he was down in the polls in 2016 also, that doesn't mean he's going to win in 2020 also, just because he's also down now. So just because the poll numbers may be similar, that doesn't mean the election outcome is going to be the exact same. So I'm saying for both candidates, supporters of both candidates, nobody should get too complacent about either candidate winning. I see a lot of people that are like, sure, Biden's going to win. I also see some people that are sure Trump's going to win. So I think no matter who you support, just know that this election can go any way. Especially with mail-in voting, the elections are really subject to change even days after the election. So we might not know for until like early December, to be honest, who won this election for sure. Honestly, we might not even know in 20 years. Like, think about Bush v. Gore. We still don't know for sure to this day who is supposed to win that election, but because the recount was taking too long, the Supreme Court eventually had to give it to George Bush. Because otherwise, there would have been a whole lot more chaos. They had like 3 days left to recount. Supreme Court decided that wasn't enough time to recount the ballots. They just gave it to George Bush because he had to move on. The electors had to cast their vote for George Bush. So they decided just give it to George Bush because there's nothing you can do now. George Bush seemed to be slightly up. So hopefully 2020 goes better than 2000, but I'm not sure if it will. Also, I feel like this country is more politically polarized than 2000. Even back in 2000, there was like a lot of protests and a lot of just a lot of divisiveness back then. A lot of like Bush supporters and Gore supporters, they really did not see each other well back then. I'm really worried this year's gonna be like that, but only worse. I hope that they can manage the mail-in ballots this year. Anyway, I think these are all my thoughts for this election. I hope you were somewhat able to keep up with this video. Is anyone even watching this fully because I only have 7 subs right now? I don't know, but if you're watching this sometime in the future after Trump's already gotten another term or Biden's already gotten his first term, I hope that my predictions for this election were somewhat accurate. Thanks for watching, guys. See you tomorrow, September 5th. Bye.